The screen you're seeing here is the Phreesia dashboard. This is what you're going to log into every day to check patients in, take payments, and verify insurance. You'll be able to see your patients' names, the list of your patients right here. These are the patients who have yet to check in this pre-registered section. Notice the dashboard is broken out into 3 different sections. We do have pre-registered, registration in progress, and checked in. The pre-registered section, like I mentioned, is where your patients who have yet to come in will sit. If for patients that are completing their registration in the office on either the Phreesia Pad or their own device, they'll be in this middle section here, and you can actually see their progress, how far they've gone through their interview and how long they've spent on completing their questions. Once the patient is done, they'll automatically drop down into the checked in section. So any patients that are finished with their Phreesia interview will live in this checked in section. Up here at the top, just going through the different features of the dashboard, always in this top left corner, just click on that and this is your refresh button. Now this is a dummy dashboard. You all will have your own customized dashboard with your patient's names imported right here. And your logo will be up here in the top left. So use that as your refresh button. So we have our pre-registered. You'll see how many patients are on the schedule for the day just right up here. It says 6 here. You do have a search bar. You can search for the patient by first or last name if you would like. You also have filters. So if we click on these 3 lines here, if you click on that, you can filter down by provider, by appointment time, if you only wanted to see patients in the next 2 hours, and then a couple different patient statuses. You can always, save those filters, remove them at any point throughout the day. Following over here on the right-hand side of the page, we have this plus icon. This is to import the patient onto the Phreesia dashboard a little bit faster. So we do run a 5-minute import. If you schedule a patient in NextGen and come over here onto the Phreesia dashboard and that patient, you don't see them in this pre-registered section yet, it usually takes around a minute or so to pull that patient over. To speed that process up, you can always click Add Patient, type their name in, and it will speed up that import process, and then you'll see that patient in the pre-registered section. So again, this plus icon is just to pull that patient into the dashboard a little bit faster. We do have this gear icon, so this gives you a couple different options. We have an automatic E&B refresh for all patients on the dashboard. So you can click on this and it will refresh the insurance. I'll go into insurance in just a couple of minutes here, but we do that automatically. Phreesia does. We send out automatic eligibility checks, so we verify the insurance, we'll refresh that. So I don't see too many practices use this. You can push out the appointment confirmation to all patients. So this just sends it out in a batch for the patients, just if you wanted to blast that out. This is also something that Phreesia does automatically, so you won't really have to worry about that as well. And then if you wanted to click print day sheet or export list, this actually just shows you your list of patients on the schedule for the day. So if you wanted, you can always print this out. If that's something that you wanted to do, you can easily print that out right there. So those are kind of the different features of the Phreesia dashboard. The last one I want to show you all is we have distribute and maximize. So the view that you're seeing now with these 3 sections, that's the distribute view, the main view that you'll be on most of the time on the dashboard. If you click on this maximize view, it will actually bump out the section that you're in so you can see more of the patients in that section, and it'll minimize the rest of the sections. So if you're looking at just, the pre-registered section and you wanted to make that a little bit larger, you can always click on this maximize button. To go back, just click on the distribute, the 3 lines. So always think 3 lines, 3 sections. So in the pre-registered section, let's drill into specific surrounding patients. So we have our patients' names here, we have the date of birth, we also have notes and flags. So this is completely internal. This is for your use to communicate with maybe your billing staff, other front office staff, anyone like that. You can leave notes. We do have two different kinds of notes. We have visit notes and patient notes. These will stay with the patient from visit to visit. So if you leave a patient note today and they come in next week, that note will still be in there when they come in next week. The visit note is just pertaining to this visit. So same situation, if you put in a visit note and the patient comes in next week, they will not have a note because it's just going to be sticking to this appointment today. The flags, this is also something completely up to you all what you would like to use this for. If you click on it like I just did, it'll turn into a red flag, and then if you click on it one more time, it'll turn into a green check mark. So again, use that for whatever you would like to do. It's there for you to use. Some practices don't even use it, so it's there for you, but if you don't want to, not necessary. Then we have appointment information, so provider, appointment type, appointment time. This little green check right here, that means that the patient has actually confirmed their appointment, which is awesome. That does confirm the appointment in NextGen as well. If you look at the pre-section here, we'll come back to this in a couple of minutes, but the pre-section is telling you if the patient completed their pre-registration from home. So what Phreesia does is we send out an email or a text a couple of days in advance of the patient's appointment where they can actually do their paperwork online from home, either on their phone or on their computer, whatever device that they have. If the patient did that, once they come into the office, you'll know that by this green check mark here. So this patient did complete their interview, their registration from home, and it's a much easier process once they get into the office. And again, I'll go through that in just a minute here. The next slide is insurance. So we have the insurance, payer name, we have the response from the payer. So this E&B column will actually show you if they're eligible, if we're missing some information, if they're self-pay, or if the insurance is inactive. We do think of this as a stoplight system. So green means go, they're eligible. Yeah, if it's a yellow question mark, maybe some information is missing. So the patient is missing their policy number, or if it's a new patient, it'll show a yellow question mark because we don't have an insurance in NextGen for them. And then if it's red, as you can see here, they're either self-pay or it's an inactive plan. You can always drill into the E&B and the insurance a little bit more by clicking on this icon. So if we click on that icon in the E&B column, you'll be able to see their plan information, coinsurance, deductible, all of this. And then if you wanted even more details about this patient's plan information, just click View Details. This will open up into an extensive report on this patient's plan, coverage, insurance details. So again, where I got that was just by clicking on the icon in the E&B column. This is where you can see the plan information. And then if you click View Details, it will bump that out and you'll see even more information. The next column is the deductible meter. So this just gives you a little snapshot into the patient's deductible. Goes up by 500. So if there's only one of these bars here, the patient has 0 to 500 deductible. It will say the specifics when you scroll over it, like you're seeing here. So 0 to 500, 500 to 1,000, and then 1,000 plus. But again, if you click on the E&B icon here, you'll be able to see their actual deductible. And then the copay. So all of this information we pull when we verify insurance. So we'll actually present the correct copay. We do verify insurance as soon as a patient hits the dashboard. So 7 days in advance of the appointment, we will show a response from the payer. Also, on the date of service, we will show we'll rerun that insurance automatically. And then on the 1st of every month, we do all of that automatically. Awesome. So moving forward, we see the copay, the paid column. Really, you should not see any money in this paid column unless the patient paid on their balance when they were completing their interview from home. They can do that. That's awesome. You always want to wait if you are collecting money for the patient to be in the checked in section. So don't ever collect money in this top section. The reason being, Phreesia does create the encounter at the point of check-in. So after the patient is checked in, the encounter has been created in NextGen. That's awesome. If you collect money before that encounter is created, then that money has no place to go back to in NextGen. So always, always, always make sure that the patient is in the checked-in section before you collect any money. By all means, you can take a look at the balance or the amount that the patient owes for today by just clicking on the amount in the balance column. Also keep in mind that the amount in the balance column is a sum of the copay and any outstanding balance that the patient has. So if we click on the amount in the balance column, you can see we have a $25 copay and a $145 balance. It is presented by line item for the patient as well, so they'll be able to see exactly what they owe and why. If you have to add any sort of charges for this visit, so if you had, like, let's say this patient is self-pay and you have a $35 self-pay charge, or, you know, the patient leaves with some sort of product that you all have, or anything like that, any additional charge for the patient's visit that you need to collect, you can actually add that in here. So, and you can add that in the top section. That's perfectly fine because you're just adding it. You're not actually collecting. You can do that by just adding the amount here. Let's say it's $10. You do want to make sure that it is a visit charge. So visit charge, think it's pertaining to this visit only. It's not an outstanding balance, so you wouldn't select balance here. It would be a visit charge. And then in the description, you can put you know, whatever that patient is leaving with that there, or whatever the charge is for. I'm just going to put in visit charge here. And then if it's something that you created the encounter for already, so that charge, you created the encounter for that charge, you know the encounter number, feel free to add the encounter number right in here. If it's not tied to today's visit, if it's a different encounter, you can always type that in here. But if it's just tied to today's encounter, then you can leave this blank. It'll go back to today's. So I'm just going to click Save here. And now you see that visit charge up at the top here. So when the patient comes in and you push the interview out to their phone or the Phreesia pad, they're actually going to see, oh, I owe that $10 for today's visit for XYZ, whatever they owe. So it does appear as an additional line item there. Okay, so you can add any sort of charges into the top section here just by clicking on the amount in the balance column. Just also keep in mind, do not collect that money in this top section. Always wait until they're in the checked in section. So let's talk about how to check a patient in now. We have a couple different ways to checking patients in. First and foremost, I've covered a little bit here, is this pre-visit idea. So we do send out an email or a text in advance of the patient's appointment where they can complete their paperwork from home. And this is just a link. The patient does not have to download an app. They don't have to remember a username or password. It is just a link sent to their device, and they can complete that paperwork and registration from home, which is a nice experience for them. They can pay privately on any outstanding balances. They can take their time, and it's less information that they have to fill out once they get into the office. So the more patients that do that, the better. And also, it's a really easy, fast process for you all. You'll just need to simply, when that patient comes in, let's say we have George over here, and he comes in and he has this green check mark. All you have to do once they arrive is click on that green check mark, and they will drop down into the checked in section. Just going to refresh my screen here. Yep, and then now he is populated into this checked in section. the encounter has been created in NextGen, and you can see that here. So I'll show you on the NextGen side. You know that the encounter has been created and the appointment has been marked as kept. So one thing about the check-in process that kind of remains the same, it'll be shorter for sure, but it remains the same where you do have to complete your auto flow. The reason being is because we do not, if the patient changes their insurance, we do not send that automatically back into NextGen. The reason being is because we don't want to give the patient 100% control over what they enter for their insurance. We want to make sure that you all have that last set of eyes on the insurance and make sure that that information is accurate going into NextGen. So if the patient does change something about their insurance, we will trigger an alert on the dashboard. It'll just be a red triangle icon, and you'll be able to see that and click on it and see that the patient changed their insurance. And from there, you can go into NextGen and maybe scan their new card in or make sure that that insurance is tied to today's encounter. All right, so after you check a patient in, you do want to wait until that appointment is marked as kept in order to start your auto flow. So this patient, we're good to go. We can just right click, check in, create encounter. The pre-visit option in Phreesia, so what we just did there, clicking on that green check mark, that is a really fast process. So sometimes it does take NextGen a second or two to mark the patient as kept. So what I would just recommend is, maybe hitting refresh once or twice before that patient in NextGen so that you're allowing the time to have that appointment marked as kept. All right. So first method of checking a patient in, check if they have this green check mark in the pre-column. All you have to do from there is click on it and they're dropped into the checked in section. It's a nice, fast process. They do not have to complete anything in the office. You don't have to push the pad out to them. You do not have to send anything to their phone because they did it all from home. The only thing that remains is if they have a copay or any outstanding balance, you can collect from there. Okay, so the next method of checking a patient in is in-office mobile. So if a patient walks up, they are here for their appointment, you can ask them, do you have a cell phone or an email address that we could send our registration process and your paperwork to your own device? So to do that, you're just going to click on the icon in the pre-column, whatever it may be. And then you're going to click Push in-office check-in. From there, you can click Push in-office check-in right here. You can choose if the patient wants it just sent to their phone, it's a text, or you can send it via email. Either or here. Once you click Push in-office check-in, the patient will get started. As soon as they get started, they'll drop into this in progress section. And you'll watch their progress. You'll be able to see when they're done, and they will drop down into the checked in section once they're done. So again, how to do that is just click on the icon in the pre-column, click Push in-office check-in, and then click this orange Push in-office check-in. And just make sure if you don't have an email or a cell phone number for the patient here, you can always just type it in, confirm with the patient right then and there. And again, it's just a link. As soon as it gets sent, they can click on it, get started from there. Similar process, checking the patient in via the Phreesia pad. I always recommend that in-office mobile is your first choice when the patient comes into the office if they haven't done pre-visit. The reason being is on the Phreesia pad, the questions are all separate. On one page, there's one question, next page, there's another question, so on. For the in-office mobile, those questions are all on one page for the patient. So there are fewer pages that they have to click through, and it's a quicker process for them. Also, patients are more likely to complete something that's on their own device, something that they're comfortable with and are used to navigating, and it'll be an easier experience for them as well. So I always recommend pitching that in-office mobile first to the patient. So say, hey, we have a new system. We are, you can complete everything from your phone. It's really easy. And then just push this link out to them. Okay, but if the patient, does want a bigger screen and wants to use the FresiaPad, that's completely fine. It's a very similar check-in experience. All you're going to do is click on the icon in the pre-column, click Push to Pad, and then click Push to Pad. You can ignore what it says right here. For you all, it will be customized based on the workflow and the appointment type that the patient's here for. So if they're a returning patient, it will say returning patient here. So from here, after you click this Push to Pad here, you're going to click that orange button, Push to Pad, and a 6-digit code will generate for you. You are going to be the one that is typing that into the FresiaPad screen. After you type that in for them, hand the pad over to the patient and let them go sit down and complete their registration. They'll bring it back up when they're done. So to walk through that slowly again, you're going to click on that icon in the pre-column, click Push to Pad, and click Push to Pad again. And then you're going to type in that 6-digit code for the patient on the FresiaPad and then hand it over to them. Okay, perfect. So 3 methods of checking a patient in so far. If they have, first and foremost, check if they have this green check mark. If they do, awesome. That's what we want. When the patient arrives, click on this green check mark and they'll pop down into the checked in section. Second is if you click on the icon in the pre-column, click Push in Office Check-in, and this is sending the link out to the patient's device. So make sure to click, if they want a text, click this radio button here and click Push in Office Check-in. Third is that Push to Pad option, where you're going to generate that 6-digit code and hand the pad to the patient. Your last line of defense, your last option for checking patients in, is your manual check-in. So if a patient comes in and they don't have a smartphone and they really don't want, they're adamant about not using the pad, which that happens all the time, it's completely fine. You will still start your check-in process in Fresia. You will click on the icon in the pre-column again, and then click Manual Check-in down here below. And this just automatically sends the patient to the checked in section. Just keep in mind with that, they do not complete any paperwork or any registration questions. You will have to hand them paper if necessary, or verbally confirm their demographics and everything in NextGen. So you always have a backup. That is your last line of defense, though. Like I said, you do want to make sure that patients are completing their information. So again, to click on the icon in the pre-column, it's the manual check-in at the bottom here. So all of those options create the encounter in NextGen and mark the patient as kept. How that works with NextGen as well, a couple of things that I've learned from go lives and previous practices and things like that, a little bit of pointers. When the patient is completing their check-in, whether it be on the FresiaPad or on their own device in the office, so when they're in this registration in progress section, you want to make sure that you are out of the patient's chart and the appointment in NextGen. The reason being is because if you're in the patient's chart, the system sees you potentially updating their demographics or updating their information at the same time that the patient is. So we're getting 2 conflicting messages on maybe updating the same information. So if you do have the patient's chart open, you do run the risk of creating duplicate encounters. All right. Same thing with the appointments. If you're in the appointment book, Fresia is seeing, oh, okay, maybe this appointment is getting canceled or rescheduled while the patient's going through their interview. So it gives conflicting messages there as well. So with that being said, if you have to scan insurance cards and photo IDs in, either do that before you hand over the FresiaPad or push that in-office mobile link, or after. So after they're done, you can always collect that information and scan it into NextGen. Speaking of, Phreesia actually, if the patient does it from their own device, either from home or in the office, we do have an awesome feature where the patient can take a picture of their insurance cards and photo ID. You'll see that. It's an icon on the dashboard. You can see this patient, George, did just that. If you click on that, you'll be able to see those two images here. I just use this as an example. That's just my library card. But you can see that the patient took a picture of their card, the front and the back. In order to get this over into NextGen, we won't send it automatically, but all you have to do is click on that icon. And then once you're here, click on this eye icon and it'll open up in a new window. And from there, all you have to do is right click on the image, copy image, and then in that same field that you would acquire the image in NextGen for their insurance card, you would just right click in that field and paste. So super easy. You can even do this in advance. So if you're looking at tomorrow's appointments and you see a patient that has that camera icon, click on it, update their insurance in NextGen. So it's one less thing that you have to do on the data service. So again, it's just click on the camera icon here, and then click on that eye icon here. Right click on the image when it populates and copy, right click in NextGen and paste. So we've gone through all of our methods of checking a patient in. We've gone through insurance. Let's talk a little bit about payments, how that works with NextGen, all of that. So Phreesia is your credit card processor from now on, and what's really nice about the integration between NextGen and Phreesia is that any money taken in Phreesia will export back into NextGen in 2 dedicated batches. So you all don't have to create your own individual batches each day. All that information is going to be exported automatically. With that being said, we do have a reconciliation process for you. I will go through that in just a second. It's super, super easy though. So let's talk a little bit about taking payments though. Again, like I mentioned before, always if you have to take a payment, wait until the patient is in this checked in section. The patient does have the opportunity to pay on their own device, also on the Phreesia Pad. On their own device, they could just type in their card information, and on the Phreesia Pad, there is an option to swipe. If the patient doesn't pay using their own device or on the pad, once you get them in the checked in section, you can see their balance and copay here. To collect that amount, you're going to click on the amount in the balance column. And here you're going to see their line items like I mentioned before. So $30 copay and a $213 balance. If the patient wants to pay on this whole amount or any portion of that amount, you do not need to add anything here. You can completely skip this section and go to the payment method. So let's say the patient had $50 in their pocket or $50 that they wanted to pay on today. So we're going to collect that copay and $20 of that balance. You would just skip this section here and go to their payment method. So I'm going to select credit card. From here, you'll be able to uncheck certain line items. Notice the check marks over here. So if the patient just wanted to pay on their copay today, just uncheck the line item for their balance. And always what I say is use this bolded total here as your source of truth. Before you click swipe, before you submit a payment, anything like that, make sure that that bolded total is the amount that the patient is going to be paying on. Too many times I've seen people, come to this screen and it's $30 that they want to pay on and they forget to uncheck this box here, and now we've overcharged the patient. All right, so always make sure to look at this bolded total and make sure that that's the amount that you're actually collecting. But let's roll with our example. The patient wants to pay $50 today. What to do here? We don't have an option to uncheck, all of that. That's where you're going to use this split option over here on the right-hand side. If we click on this, it's going to split this balance into a smaller amount so that you can actually collect the amount that you want. So I know we need $20 of this balance to make that $50. So once you click this split icon, I'm just going to type in $20 here and click Save. Now it breaks it down into two different line items. So now we do have the option to use our check marks and select the $50 total. Again, all I used was this split icon over here. So once you have your total, you do have an option to email the receipt if the patient does want that as an option. Just check this before you click swipe. In the memo field here, I really only see practices use this for check numbers. So if you're collecting via check, you can always just type in the check number there. You do have an option to type in the card information. So if the card reader is a little faulty right on the card, it's an older card and it's unreadable, you can always just type in the card number and information down here. But you will have a credit card swipe from Phreesia. So to use that, all you have to do is click swipe the card on your little USB reader, and it will process on the dashboard here. So I'm just going to go ahead and run this transaction with a dummy card. So I've entered in the card number, the expiration date, confirm the billing address is correct, and click Submit. The screen is showing that the transaction was successful. You have two options here for credit cards. You have a patient copy and a merchant copy. The merchant copy does have a line for a signature, so if you all wanted to capture that and have a patient signature, you could. Word of advice, always click Open Receipt here if you wanted to print it out. The print receipt option, it has to be hooked up to your printer, and if you have multiple printers, it could only go to one, so it's kind of hairy there. So I always just suggest always clicking Open Receipt, and you can print it to whatever printer you want from here. All right. Let's say the patient, you collect the money, the patient doesn't want a receipt at check-in, but they get to check-out and they're like, I paid earlier, I do want a receipt actually. You can always go back in and print out that receipt by clicking on the amount in the paid column. And your options for receipts are right here. This is also the screen where you could void a transaction. If you made a mistake, I need to void this and rerun the card, you could do so here as well. So just think, those are both actions that take place after a payment is made. If you need to void or print out a receipt, always click on the amount in the paid column. Both of those options are there. So again, to walk through that a little bit slower, we are at how to collect any money. First and foremost, they're in the checked in section. Good to go, we can collect. You're always going to start that process by clicking on the amount in the balance column. If the patient wants to pay on this total or any portion of that total, you do not have to type anything in this middle section. You can go straight to the payment method. If you needed to add any sort of charge, like I was saying before, if the patient has, any additional charge for today's visit, that's where you can add that in here as a visit charge. But if the patient, like I said, if they want to pay on this total or any portion, we can just go ahead into the payment method. And we will, if there are multiple line items, you can uncheck each one if the patient doesn't want to pay on all of them. If you needed to split this, so if the patient only wanted to pay $100 of this balance, you can always split and just type in $100 and it will create two line items. And from there, you can always email the receipt if the patient wants that. If the email address is not in here, you can always type it in, and then you can click Confirm. All right. Awesome. So that $50 is already back in NextGen in the appropriate batch. It's exported to the copays on today's encounter. That balance amount is back to the line item it originated from. We're all good there. So let's talk about reconciling and closing at the end of the day. What you would do there, you don't have to do anything in NextGen. There's no batch in NextGen for you to close. What I always recommend to do at the end of the day, if I know I collected some money, is if you go over here on the right-hand side, it's click on this arrow icon over here and click the arrow icon next to collections. Once you do that, it shows you a report of everyone's transactions for the day at the location you're at. So if a couple different people took some money today, you'll see everyone's on this list here. It will show you the totals in the top section here. So it'll show you your totals by transaction type. So credit cards, cash, check, and then your grand total over here. And then at the bottom, it will break it down by person. So you can see exactly which patient, how much, what the payment method was, the details, all of that. So since this report does show all the users at your location, you want to make sure you're just looking at yourself at the end of the day. So what you're going to do is click on this All Users drop-down menu, uncheck where it says Select All, scroll down, find your name, and then click out here on the page. It will refresh to only show your collections for the day. And you can pull this report at any point throughout the day. You can look if you're just curious, all of that. But this is what I just suggest running at the end of the day, so you can see that your totals in your drawer or your envelope are the same as this Phreesia report. So you're seeing, if I collected $100 cash, I know I have that $100 bill right in front of me. Okay, so really how I got there again is on the dashboard on the right-hand side, you're going to click this arrow icon next to collections, and it'll open that report up. Just remember to filter down to yourself in the All Users drop-down menu and click out here and it will refresh. Awesome. So the last thing I want to go through is in regards to payments. Again, we've gone through collecting money for a patient that has an appointment today. You're just going to click on the amount in the balance column. What if a patient calls over the phone, wants to make a payment, they don't have an appointment, or even just comes into the office and wants to make a payment? What you would do from here is, since they don't have an appointment, you're not going to do it from the main dashboard page. You're going to actually do that from it's over on payments and then new transaction. Once you come in here, you're going to actually just search for the patient. So let's look up a random patient here. You can either search by the chart number in Phreesia, that is referring to the patient's person number in NextGen, or you can search by the patient's first, last, and date of birth. Once the patient appears, you want to click on their name in the drop-down menu here. You never want to click on Add New. I know it's really tempting. It looks kind of like a search button, but you want to make sure that you are selecting the patient's name from this drop-down menu here. So once you do that, the location is going to default to the location that you're on, so you don't have to worry about that. You do not have to worry about selecting a provider. So from here, all you're going to do is click Pay Now. So once this screen populates, it's going to look like this. So we don't have anything in the top section. Let's say the patient's over the phone and says, I want to pay $50 on my balance. I know I owe that. From here, you can actually just type in $50. It's going to be a balance, not a visit charge, right? Because he's paying on their balance. The patient over the phone is paying on their balance. It's not something that they have a visit for. So we're going to keep it as balance. Description can be, again, whatever you'd like. And then you can type in the encounter number here. So that's not necessary if, let's say the patient has 5 different open encounters in NextGen where they have money that they owe. If you do not put an encounter number here, Phreesia is just going to send that back to the oldest encounter first and then trickle its way up. So if that's fine, you don't have to worry about the encounter number. Let's say this patient is calling over the phone and they say, hey, I want to pay on my $50 balance on my visit on May 30th. So really, drilling into what they want to pay on. If that encounter is in the middle of their 5 different encounters in NextGen, you don't necessarily want this $50 to go back to that oldest first. You want to specify which encounter that's going back to. So that's a situation where you could type in the encounter number right in here. All right. So again, not necessary to include the encounter number if it's just going to go back, if you're okay with it just going back to the oldest encounter first. If the patient does want to pay on a specific encounter, then you can type in that here. So now that we have that all filled out, we can click Save. And this is a familiar screen that we were used to seeing on the dashboard, right? We have our total up here, and we can go ahead and collect the payment down below. All right, so let me walk through that slowly one more time. So from the main dashboard page, you are going to go to Payments, New Transaction. And again, this is for non-visit payments. Anyone that does not have a visit or appointment just wants to make a payment. So Payments, New Transaction. You can search for the patient by either person number or first last date of birth. Once they populate in the drop-down menu down below, you're going to click on their name, then select Pay Now. From here, you're going to type in the balance. You're going to keep it at the balance. You can put in whatever description you want. And then if it is going back to a specific encounter, you can type in the encounter number there. After you do so, you can click Save and then go ahead and collect. After the transaction is successful, you will also receive, as soon as that goes through, you'll receive a message saying that it went through, and you can print the receipt. All right. So that's pretty much everything you need to know about the Phreesia dashboard. Again, just to go through the flow of checking patients in and everything, you're still going to use NextGen as your scheduling tool. So you're going to always schedule appointments in NextGen. A week in advance of the patient's appointments, they're going to flow into the dashboard here. On the date of service, to check patients in, you're always going to start by clicking on the icon in the pre-column, whether it's this green check mark, that means they've completed it from home, or pushing it out to their mobile device in the office, or that Phreesia pad, or your last option of manually checking a patient in. Once a patient is starting on their own device or the Phreesia pad in the office, they will populate in this in progress section, and once they're done, they'll drop into the checked in section. Phreesia does create the encounter at the time of check-in, so you are going to, after the patient's done with their interview, after they've done on the Phreesia pad or on their own device, or after you've checked them in, you're going to go into NextGen and complete the auto flow for that patient. If you need to collect any money, you want to wait until the patient's in the checked in section and select the balance, the amount in the balance column to collect that money. At the end of the day, for collecting any or looking at your collections totals, you're always going to select this arrow icon next to collections. And again, like I mentioned earlier, once the patient is starting their interview in progress, you want to make sure you are not in the patient's chart or their appointment, because that could create duplicate encounters. And again, one last time to reiterate, you always want to wait until the patient is marked as kept and the encounter has been created before you start your auto flow. So always make sure that's done first before you go ahead and check and create encounter. All right. Perfect. Well, thank you all so much for joining, and please let me know if you have any questions whatsoever. Thank you so much.